Welcome back to Recovery After Stroke. I'm Bill Gassiamas, and today's guest is Ben Sautter, a stroke survivor from Montana who in 2017 suffered an ischemic stroke caused by a carotid artery blockage. Ben was in his mid-50s working as a superintendent for the city of Helena when he woke up one morning with his leg buzzing like it was electric and his speech starting to slur. But this episode isn't really about the stroke itself. It's about what the stroke uncovered. Ben spent decades living what he now calls a Jekyll and Hyde existence, including a period of incarceration for drug trafficking that he says he felt no guilt over at the time. And after his stroke, that started to change. We talk about emotional flatness, PTSD-like symptoms he didn't recognize until years later, the marriage he nearly lost, and the memoir he wrote in just 10 weeks that finally helped him understand himself. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, check out my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened, over at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. And if this show has helped you, you can support it at patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. And you can help me keep it going so that we can get to 1,000 episodes. If you're feeling stuck in your recovery and want more structure and one-on-one support, I also offer a coaching program called Momentum. You can find out more at recoveryafterstroke.com/momentum. Now, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Ben. Benjamin Sautter, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks much for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about what life was like before 2017 and the stroke?
Well, I was on it back then before the stroke. Had a job that I really enjoyed. I was working for the city of Helena as a superintendent of streets and traffic division, and life was going really good for me there. And then it kind of came to an abrupt halt.
What was life like as far as what kind of work were you doing? What was family life like?
Well, our family was pretty close at the time. We have 2 children, and we were busy. We were really close, busy traveling. We had a motor home. We had lots of fun. We hunt and fish, a lot of outdoor activities here. We have a little cabin that we spent all our weekends at, if we weren't traveling, that is. So home life was pretty good. My wife and I were struggling a bit before I had my stroke, but we were a close family. And work was good. I progressed up into mid-level management, and I had great people, great staff underneath of me, and we got a lot of good work done for the city and had a lot of fun at work. Work was going good. Everything was going pretty good.
Was there any sign that something was amiss with your health, that perhaps there was something looming that wasn't going to be fun?
No, I was in great shape. I had no signs of anything coming. So it was out of the blue. The stroke was out of the blue.
What was that day like? Was there any kind of deficits that you experienced that gave you a hint that something was going wrong, or how did it evolve?
Well, I woke up in the morning to go to work. I knew something was funny and I couldn't figure it out. I think when I woke up, I get up early and to get in before my first crew was in. The mechanics were in at 6. So I was in before that. But when I woke up, my left leg was just buzzing like it was electric from my hip to my toe. And I didn't comprehend. I was thinking it was like a sciatic something, because I had a little sciatic pain from time to time in my right side, even though I knew this wasn't the same, but I didn't have the cognitive awareness of what was going on. And so I worked out in the middle of it, thinking maybe it was muscles in my back. And if I exercise did go away, and it didn't when I went on into work, and my mechanics were nervous. I was starting to slur my words, and I kind of felt it. I asked them, I think, if I was slurring my words, and they just kind of smiled at me. And I went back up to my office, and then another one of my other supervisors came in, and he sat down. He could tell something wasn't right with me, and then he left, and they were all getting together to come and check me out, and I left. I had a meeting, or not a meeting. I had a doctor's appointment out at the VA Fort Harrison for 7:30 that morning, and so I was late, and I think my doctor called me, and I was on the road driving out there, and I told her kind of things were funny and what was going on, and she said, "Well, you need to get out here, get a ride out here." I said, "Well, I'm driving." She said, "Oh God, no." She pretty well could tell. She thought I was having a stroke right there. And I drove out there. I went upstairs to see her, and they took me right down to the emergency right there.
And did they immediately diagnose that you were having a stroke?
Well, getting a little blurry on me right there. I don't really remember what they thought right at the time, right at that moment when I was in the emergency. I know a couple hours later, they came to me, and there was no doubt about it. They knew then. They had speech therapists in, and a neurologist in the room. And so it took a couple hours for a sure diagnosis that I was in the middle of a stroke.
It's pretty common
remember.
pretty common that you're not going to remember exactly what was happening at that time. Things were compromised. That makes complete sense. How long before, rather, at some point you're told that you had a stroke. How do you take that information?
I don't know that it didn't go over my head, but I wasn't devastated. And because I wasn't, I was familiar with stroke. My father had had strokes, and he'd been paralyzed and lost his speech. So his were very severe. So at the time, I wasn't feeling that I was that impacted by it. I knew some things were going on, but looking back, I can tell I just didn't have the awareness of what was happening to me, even though I knew it. But it just didn't feel serious to me.
It didn't sink in, perhaps.
Yeah, I would say so. Certainly not the gravity of it. And it took quite some time. I'd say at least 6 months, really, before I started being aware of my cognitive deficiencies and wondering, asking myself questions, even though within a week's time I was at VA Salt Lake to have surgery on my carotid artery. So all that happened, and I was still, it's not that I was in denial. Well, I didn't think I was, but now looking back, that could have been what it was. But I was aware. I knew it happened. Gosh, I had surgery. I understood it all. I saw the MRI. I saw the mark on my brain. I had the surgery, as I said. But it just, the seriousness of it didn't sink into me. Because within 2 weeks, my doc cut me loose. My surgeon, I was up in the woods hunting. full tilt. They said, go ahead. So that kind of helped me believe that what I said, I dodged a bullet is how I put it. And even though I didn't really dodge the bullet.
So you said that you had about 6 months where you kind of had no real awareness, or your cognition was impacted. Obviously your cognition was impacted, but what other deficits did you have?
Well, I would just say the cognition, the physical part, I had that numbness in my leg. I didn't even have a limp from it, but my whole leg, well, it's still somewhat, for years was, like I say, my whole leg was stuck in a light socket, just buzzing like electric from my hip to my toe. And that lasted a long, long time. My leg got real heavy. I had to, like I say, it didn't show that I was limping or anything, but I had to work at that to not let it show. I had to make sure I high stepped kind of so my toe didn't drag and I didn't trip. I had to be very well aware of that to make it look like I was okay. But really physically, it didn't show.
Your introductory email to me about joining me on the podcast was interesting. What you had seems to be a catalyst for some change in your life. Like what occurred to you, the stroke, the hospitalization, the challenges that you had to overcome, seems to be a catalyst for change in your life. Before the stroke in 2017, you said your wife and yourself were going through some difficult times, but you were busy at work. You had a whole bunch of other things going on. But there's another side of you. There was another side of you at some stage that you were living, a life that you were living that's not quite the run-of-the-mill standard lifestyle. Tell me a little bit about that. And was that lifestyle that you're going to tell us a little bit about now, was that something that you lived until your stroke?
I'm living that still right now, that dual personality. And after the stroke, it might have taken a couple of years of me looking back. I was finally looking back, wondering who that guy was, that other guy. I would say to myself, I feel like two different people. And it wasn't until after the stroke, I think, that I really asked that question or said that to myself, that I feel like two different people. And that came from questioning the things I did when I was younger. I was a pretty wild guy, and I did things that didn't seem like me, yet I know I did all those things. Well, hell, I got arrested, went to prison, so I know I was doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. But back then it was pretty easy to do. And it didn't feel like me doing it. So after the stroke, I really started asking questions, trying to look back to understand. And I never got that understanding until I wrote that book last year. And then it all just poured out, and I could see the dual personality. And I still am that dual guy. My wife is able to recognize that more now. And when she tells me about it, I can really see it when she explains it, especially what I say. I say things that I don't mean, that aren't me. that I don't understand why I say those things. And I named it Hyde, and Hyde speaks different than I do, than Jekyll.
How old were you when you ended up in prison, and how old were you when you got out?
I was 32 when I got arrested, and I was only out for like 13 months. So I was 34 when I got out.
And the stuff that you went in for, what kind of things were you doing that ended you up in prison?
I got arrested for drug trafficking.
And at the time, was there a certain amount of disassociation from the behavior? And did you kind of find yourself doing things that you just weren't, what was it, maybe like connected to logically? How did you find yourself being in a situation that you now describe as this was not you, or it was another you?
That's a good question. I have to say I don't really understand yet where I was back then. It I had to it had to be that disassociation, because I was a legitimate guy. I worked, I had jobs, I had good respect from people. I was a legitimate man all day long, every day. And I'd just slip out and did stuff. I had no feelings about it. I never felt guilty about doing anything. I never had no shame, no remorse. I still don't. I don't feel those feelings. They just aren't in me. Even after the book, after writing that and starting to understand that I don't have those feelings, which I still don't. But way back then, I didn't give a first thought to any of that illicit stuff I was doing. It was opportunity, and I just went and did it. Didn't give it a thought.
Got it. And then when you ended up coming out of prison, did you go back onto the straight and narrow? Did you still dabble? How was life after that? Because it was 30 years almost, between your incarceration and then your stroke. So I'm just trying to set the scene just so I can ask you the next question later on about the stroke. So what was life like after the incarceration?
So, and I've been thinking about that a lot lately and writing about that. And that I had to make a very conscious decision. And the way I put that, prison didn't rehabilitate me. I had to make that decision that, okay, I don't want to go back there. I need to watch over myself and keep myself out of trouble, which all those big crimes weren't a problem. But little things, I went hunting. I was a poacher. I trespassed. Those types of things. I was very careful not to be caught speeding in a car or any of that. Drinking and driving, a little bit. I'd find myself doing that, and that was a difficult thing to overcome. To quit drinking, and so I'd find myself drunk behind the wheel, and I finally again made a conscious decision, but it took a little time to work out of that, to finally draw a line in the sand. In fact, it wasn't until a year or two after I got married that I finally just quit drinking completely, and that was good. That was a good move. So it was. I can't say that it was a struggle, but it was risky for me out of prison that I didn't get caught at those littler, less severe law breaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing here is you've described yourself as Hyde. There's a Jekyll somewhere here as well, and also in your description of your behavior and the way that you weren't associated with it, or you have no feeling about something, or you have no um, connection to what it meant when you were breaking the law. It sounds a little bit sociopathic, and it sounds like perhaps there was some kind of what people might describe um, as a psychiatric kind of challenge or issue there. Has that ever come up in a conversation with anybody?
No, more the compartmentalization, dissociation. I lived with, and I didn't know this until 2021 or 22. I lived with three emotions: happy, sad, and angry. That's and I learned that when my wife brought out a feelings wheel, and she brought out this feelings wheel, and she's saying, "Tell me where you land on some of these." And I thought, well, happy, sad, and angry, and that's about as far as I went with it. And once in a while, I'd feel a little something, but not really very much. So that's when I learned I was operating on three emotions. That's all I ever had. So that really showed the compartmentalization and the disassociation right there. Psychopathic or psychopath has
So,
never come up, even with my psychologist. Um, uh, she never identified that, but I just saw her for the first time since I wrote the book a few weeks ago and gave her a copy of the book. And she was a little bit wide-eyed and surprised at the book, and she's reading it. So what kind of conversation we're going to have now will be really interesting to go back and see her. But answer to your question, no, psychopath, no, just compartmentalizing.
yes, sociopath, not psychopath.
Sociopath, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sociopaths tend to be people who, in the moment, can't connect with the behavior, good, bad, indifferent, and then later on have the ability to kind of notice that the behavior was inappropriate in some way, shape, or form, and kind of have, well, maybe not regret, but kind of some understanding of the behavior being inappropriate. Whereas psychopaths are completely different, like they have no empathy, no nothing, right? There's nothing there. So it's kind of not where I was headed. I wasn't
Yeah.
asking that, but it's interesting that you describe these two separate versions of yourself. It's not uncommon to how I describe myself after the stroke, but I didn't have a Jekyll and Hyde streak in me, but I had a line in the sand. The stroke seemed to take my brain offline for a little while, and it allowed me to connect with other parts of my body. Specifically, I talk about connecting with my heart, and it made me more empathetic and more able to kind of access what my values were, rather than what my head thought was the right thing to do, or what my head thought was the right approach or the right way to go about things. So it seems like the stroke has played some kind of a similar role in your ability to reflect on your past in a different way, in a more associated way compared to what you had done before. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. We talk about the stroke not being all bad for me because I've become far more aware. And that awareness is big, not just of my past and who I was, but being able to listen so much better and more aware of what I say, think, and do, much more so. So yeah, the stroke has been good for me in a lot of ways. Causes some of those difficulties without a doubt, but I think my wife would agree that I'm a better person despite um, the change in moral compass after my incarceration, but I still was a Jekyll and Hyde, and I still am today. She can see me come in and out of it much quicker than I have any idea. Not necessarily on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, and in conversation. She can see by what I say.
What's better about being able to listen more? You said that you were able to hear more or pay attention better in a conversation, for example. Why is that better?
The understanding of the person I'm talking to, and the understanding of myself, and listening to hear rather than listening to respond. So that's big for me, because I used to be so quick. I'd hear something, I could make decisions. I was very impulsive. I've really reined that in to calm myself down and just listen better, be slower, more deliberate, more purposeful. All of those things are much better for me. In fact, I didn't have any of that before the stroke. I was full tilt on everything. I thought I did. I thought I was very considerate, concerned, and listened, but in comparison, no, that wasn't me.
You said it's better for you. Like, what? How is it better for you? How has it improved your life?
I'm not banging heads so much. I let people have their thoughts, their opinions, and I don't take offense to that. So everything's calmer, and I just don't have the head banging I used to have.
Why is it important for people to have their opinions and their thoughts?
Well, I'm right and you're wrong. Isn't that what it's all about? Everybody wants to be right and think that everybody should agree with them. That's how I see it now. It's like, and if I'm right and you're wrong. I don't do that anymore.
Got it. Got it. This part of you that your wife still sees, that you've kind of been able to rein in, like, is it a sinister side of you that she sees? Is it the conniving side of you? Is it the one that's possible to be led astray? Which side of it does she still see that kind of attends these conversations with your wife?
I'm not sure how you name this. Perfect example is if I slip up, do something wrong, and Helen will bring my attention to it. I'll say, well, I just did that to see if you're paying attention. So I try to deflect things. I have that definitely the inferiority or I'm on myself. We're all our own worst critic, of course, and I really feel self-conscious. I know my deficiencies, and I go back and forth. I know my deficiencies and I live with it. I'm okay with it. But sometimes if someone says something to me, Helen, one time it's okay and I get by it. One time it's like it hits and it hurts. And I react. I try to deflect. I say things. Hyde comes out of me and says things like to hurt back. And so and she's getting better about not letting me do that. And the sooner she says something now, if she says something right away, I go, oh, yeah, sorry, I did say that. Whereas before, I didn't remember saying things, and I would say that. She'd say, she'd wait too long and then tell me you said something. Well, I wouldn't say that. I don't think those things. That's Jekyll saying, I don't even think that. I didn't say that. You took it wrong. Now I'm more believing that Hyde would say those things, and if she comes back quick enough and I can I'm right there. I'm like, oh, yes, yeah, you're right. And I can apologize, but I'm getting better and better at not saying those things and catching myself now, which is big, to stop it before it happens. So as we talk through this, I am starting to be more aware of Hyde, what he says, what he thinks, and certainly what he does. I conquered that long time ago, but what he says and what he thinks, I'm starting to catch that before I go wrong.
I'm going to make a lot of assumptions now. You seem very unassuming as a 63-year-old man who lived a dual life, went to prison and all that. You wouldn't pick that up from meeting you on a Zoom call or in person per se, right? And often people who kind of live double lives, etc., there's an underlying cause, something that happened earlier on in life that caused them to take on a certain persona or to be a certain way or to get through a certain difficult time in their upbringing or the circumstances by which they found themselves in. Did you have origin story? Was there something that you can think back at that perhaps that led you to take on another persona in certain situations, or is it just how you've always been?
The way it came out in writing my memoir, it was from when I was little, really little. And there was two things about it. We didn't talk about feelings. When you get hurt, you don't cry about it, or you just don't cry about it. You don't feel anything. And my dad was a risk taker, and he was a lot of fun. He taught me some of my worst habits, if not most of them, and I followed in his footsteps. Risk was exciting. Terror was exciting. Being scared was fun. That's how my dad taught me. And you add that with no feeling, no fear. It was easy. I said earlier, it was really easy to go do those things shouldn't do. It was fun, and there was money in it, and calculated risks. No problem. It was just no problem.
Your wife seems to have found something in you that was likable enough to kind of overlook that stuff or to not see that stuff as being a real issue. What do you think it is that she saw in you that kind of had her be okay with hanging out with a guy who had been incarcerated and perhaps had these tendencies to switch between these two personalities?
Well, the incarceration, I thought I told her everything. I told her, I told her enough for me to think I told her everything. And she felt that she saw me pay my dues, and she didn't know a lot up until this last year. She didn't see the dual side of me. Even though we struggled, she thought it was just me being me. Now it's so much more clear. And she's the one that came up with the Jekyll and Hyde when I was halfway through the book. And stories were coming out she'd never heard before. And that's when one day she said, "You're like a Jekyll and Hyde." And that really changed the framework of my story. And it showed me, or helped me understand myself, the dual personality. It still took a little bit to build it through the book to get a full understanding of it and draw a clear picture. But by the time I was done with the book, it was easy to see the dual personality.
Did your wife, what did she like about you though? Like she's been around for a little while by the sound of it.
Yeah, we've been together over 30 years. Um, you'd have to ask her that. Uh, I think, well, I'm a fun guy. I was caring and um, that Jekyll guy's pretty decent fella. I'm successfully in business and I'm a hardworking guy. I just that side of me, um, nice guy. I think there was a little intrigue probably from my past that I was an exciting guy. I did a lot of things and even though once we met, I was really trying to taper down and really trying to get a hold of myself, and which I did, and we did really really well together for quite a few years, and then I think I wore her down with that dual personality. Not think, I know I did. She finally, it was too much for her, and and things kind of went south for us. I, 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 I can't imagine, even though I watched what I put her through. I don't know how she lasted. She left for a lot of years after my stroke. We split up for a lot of years, and uh, I've made some changes.
So have you been able to reconcile?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we have.
Do you think anything that you and I have just discussed, anything of that would have been possible if you didn't have this stroke?
Oh, I would say no, no, not unless I'd have wrote the book and it happened like it did. But before the stroke, no, I couldn't get there. I wanted to. I tried. We had a lot of conversations, but it was like a wall. I just couldn't see through it. I couldn't get through it. I just couldn't get there. So no, we would not be having this conversation if I
That's
hadn't had a
fascinating
stroke.
to me. That's just fascinating to me that you've had this turnaround. And not to say that turnarounds are complete as soon as the stroke happens, or that things are easier or different or better or whatever, but like there seems to be a genuine willingness to discover what this newer version of yourself could be like, and could emerge into an author, somebody who wrote a book, somebody who's reconciled with your wife, somebody who's admitted all these things that you've admitted, and kind of made a concerted effort to not fall into those traps. Again, you've associated with things, and it's all because of a stroke, because of a carotid artery blockage, or was it a dissection? What was it?
It's just a blockage above the Y,
Yeah.
and a little piece of it. I got so lucky. It was a huge blockage, and a little tiny piece flaked off, hit
Uh-huh.
me right up in this side, and that's why they had to go in and remove that chunk of plaque.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And it's kind of, it seems like it's, for you at least, this experience has been um, really positive, other than the, of course, risk to your physical well-being and your life, right? Seems a lot of positive has come out of it.
I would have to agree with that, and I know Helen would too. I'm much different. I'm a much better person than I was. So yes, the stroke. I don't think there's many people can say that the stroke has done me more good than bad. The physical part of it has been a challenge, but I push that every day, and I'm working hard with that still. But the cognitive part of it, uh, um, yeah, I'm a better man now.
Mm. You've got a copy of the book in front of you, I believe.
Yes.
Show us the book. Tell me a little bit about um, how you came to write it. Like, what's the why did you feel the need to write the book?
So I actually started the book in 2016 before I had the stroke. And my intention was to write a bunch of stories about all the crazy things I did, crazy things that happened to me. Just a book of stories is what I was going to write. And once I got serious about it last September, I sat down, got out what I had, and once I started, I couldn't stop writing. I wrote this book in 10 weeks, and it just poured out of me. And it's nothing like I ever would have thought I could write. It has good value. It has value for anyone that reads it.
So it's a 10-year project that took 10 days to 10 weeks or 10 days to complete?
10 weeks.
10 weeks to complete. So that's really cool in that, like, the idea was already there, germinating. It took a while. You had to overcome certain things. You had to probably move beyond, certain parts of um, your transformation to get to the stage where the book was possible. It sounds like you put in work with your family, with yourself. How long have you been seeing a counselor?
Right after the stroke, I started seeing my psychologist. And it's interesting to me, really early on, she had me doing work that was for PTSD. And she would give me lessons to bring home, and they were for the veterans that suffered from PTSD, which I never knew anything about it. It was kind of a phantom thing for me because I didn't know anything. And I'll be honest with you here. One night on 60 Minutes, I was watching a veteran with his wife and daughter being interviewed on 60 Minutes, and he had the PTSD. And that family was talking about him doing thinking the exact things I was doing with my family. And that really just hit me hard. No wonder I'm doing PTSD work, because the stroke is the same thing in a sense. And that's where I learned so much watching that segment that night. I learned about myself, my family, and that's when I realized my family suffered the stroke as much as I did.
Mm.
That came to me.
What's interesting is I asked you about things that might have happened in your past that may have been foundational kind of things that were responsible for these two personalities of you. You mentioned your dad, your upbringing, some of the stuff that he would get up to, and how you were kind of influenced by him. But I just heard now that you're a veteran. So did you actually attend? Did you serve as a veteran?
I did. I did a couple years in the Navy, and right when the Vietnam War was ending. In fact, I was in April of '75 is when it ended, and I never went overseas. I was shore duty in California. I was at NAS Alameda, and that's a pretty big piece in my book of my time in the Navy, which is quite a story. But I didn't suffer any. I didn't go to war.
War, no battle.
I did not go to war.
No battles or anything like that. And do you think the PTSD was from something else, perhaps?
I think it was just from the stroke, and I didn't know it. That's what I got from that 60 Minutes segment is the cognitive things that I was saying that and didn't understand what the stroke did to me. I thought I was fine. I went to back to work a couple months after I had the stroke. I worked for a couple months, and I realized I wasn't cutting it.
Whose idea was it to go to counseling after the stroke?
I don't know that I don't remember, but I would say they probably just assigned me to a psychologist to see where I'm at, help me through it. VA Fort Harrison is phenomenal. Those people, great staff there. So they just were taking care of me, I think.
Yeah,
I
might
don't
have just
remember
been
it.
standard part of the approach to helping somebody who's a VA.
That would be my guess that it was just part of their program.
And it sounds like you were pretty willing, or were you resistant at the beginning? Do you recall how you felt about being in counseling?
Yeah, I was fine to go there and really really like this psychologist I see, and the other ones. I've seen numerous psychologists there, and yeah, they. I always feel better coming out of there than I do when I walk in. So no doubt.
Have you expanded on your happy, sad, angry emotions?
I'm pretty even now. I don't get too wild. When I first had the stroke, I was very emotional. I was tears in my eyes over almost nothing. It was quite a struggle
That's
for
common.
some years, and now I'm very well in control of my emotions, and to the point that I might be a fairly boring guy. I like to have fun. I laugh a lot. I'm not the wild guy that I was, but um, so I don't have much anger. I don't have much sadness. My sadness used to turn to anger. So I really had happy and angry. It's really what I had. Um, I don't go there anymore. Life is too good for me now. I don't have sadness or anger.
Every so often you say a couple of things and it triggers me to ask you the next question again. And it's kind of my job to probe. And this is not a counseling session, but it's very fascinating. Was there perhaps some kind of a personality disorder there, like a bipolar or something like that? Because you're describing like happy, angry, or do you know there's no in between, and it's very bipolar-ish. Whereas
Mm.
I know it's not bipolar because in bipolar they're described as being happy and really, really kind of deep, sad extremes. But you seem to occupy a similar kind of space. Does that ring a bell? Did anyone ever bring that up, perhaps?
No, I'm just too happy all the time. Always not in the good mood that I always used to be, but I lived a pretty happy life. I just didn't let the rest get me. But when I went off in the weeds, I my anger was um, would get away from me.
That's a great way to describe it because tends to be how anger is. Like it just kind of builds up, and then it gets away. And if you do that often enough, it becomes really easy to get to anger. And what people don't realize is that anger is also, and complaining and all those types of things also releases dopamine in the brain. There is a reward that people get for misbehaving and expressing anger. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. There is also I'm trying to achieve something or get something done, or I'm trying to intimidate someone, or I'm trying to, um, you know, get a child to take action somewhere where they've frustrated me or whatever. So there is this underlying purpose for anger, but also it's rewarding to the brain when you act out in an angry way.
I think that's a really good point. When I was younger, I would look to break something. I would get so mad. I would break something and then I felt good about it. Okay, I got that broke now. Now I can be happy again. So just exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That
Hmm.
is interesting. It's interesting and fascinating. This has been one of the most interesting conversations I've had because we've barely spoken about the stroke and how you experienced it and what it did to you. But it seems like we've spoken about it enough in that it was a catalyst to something new, something different. And often my uh, attempt has always been in these interviews is to tell people about the fact, we share a story of what life was like before stroke for people, and then we share the story of like what happened during the stroke time, and then what happened after. And if you're currently in the stroke moment, it's really, really hard. You don't know where things are headed. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of change, a lot of experiences that you never saw coming, things that are happening. You might be experiencing your body differently, your cognition differently, your hearing, your speech. It all might be different, and it's extremely full on in that moment. And the idea is, well, let's continue with the conversation and try and move and paint a picture of what life might be like for somebody, even though they're going through a really hard time 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the track, and you're in the 10-year mark, and it's taken you 10 years to get here. Write a book, reflect on your past, the way that you've been reflecting, mend your relationships, become more aware of your behavior, the one that served you, the one that didn't. And it's not really a story about stroke, but stroke seems to have been the catalyst for an opportunity for you to look at things a different way, and for it to break certain patterns that were embedded that now have been able to be kind of like fizzled. The edges of them were fizzled away so that something could enter and, like throw a spanner in the works and change the way the cogs moved. And it's just fascinating that stroke can do that. But if we didn't talk about that part of stroke, that good part of stroke, people might only see stroke as only ever being a terrible thing that happened to them, which I also understand if somebody feels that way, because there's a big spectrum of how people are impacted by stroke. So I don't want to take that away from people who are suffering. But, like the shift and the change that you've had through a stroke is just night and day. It's phenomenal.
One of the bigger things I think I've learned that goes with that is, it's been a few years ago, I learned that guy that I was, that guy's gone, and I am not going to be that guy ever again. So I'm looking at the guy that I am, who I believe is a better guy than I was anyway. So that's been a good thing. And I think that comes from my wife and from my psychologist at the VA, that there's no more who I was, it's who I am. And that's come a long ways because of that,
Yeah.
I believe.
And who you're becoming by the sound of things.
That too, yes. Yeah, because I do, that's a really good point. I do know I will get better. I will be better as time goes on. But you got to keep working at it.
Yeah. Being better and getting better, does that mean that the way the leg feels is different, or can the way the leg feels not necessarily go back to normal, and you still are getting better, you still are improving, even though your leg perhaps stays?
Leg's gaining. My pain is way, way, way down to where my pain is nil. I can go, well, I do a lot of needles. I do a lot of injections. I do a lot for it, but those are getting less. So I'm hurting less. I'm hiking better. I ride my bike a lot. All those things I'm gaining. The numbness, the tingle's gone. That electricity thing, like your fingers in a socket, that's all gone. The hard stiffness is down in my lower leg and my foot, so my leg's better. Yeah, physically, I'm getting better, better, better.
Yeah. Where can people go and find the book?
Amazon. Amazon. Mr. Hyde and Me.
Yeah.
The name of the book. Yeah. This is me. This picture is me.
Yeah.
On the corner of Wilson and Main Street in downtown Bozeman. Bozeman, Montana. So took a lot of thought to make that picture and to get that shadow just right. So my shadow guy facing into him head on, and been a lot of reward doing this. This I call this therapy on steroids.
Yeah.
Writing this book was incredibly therapeutic.
Yeah. I can imagine. Ben, thank you so much for reaching out. I really appreciate your conversation and your honesty, and I really wish you well with your recovery ongoing.
And thank you. This is one of the better conversations I've had about my situation ever. So, Bill, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it, and I'll look forward to how this all turns out.
Well, that's it for another episode of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. If there's one thing to take from this episode, it's Ben's line. That guy that I was, that guy's gone. I'm not going to be that guy ever again. A stroke took something from Ben, but it also gave him a level of self-awareness and emotional range he says he never had access to before. And it helped him rebuild a marriage he thought he'd lost for good. If you want the full story, Ben's memoir, Mr. Hyde and Me, is available on Amazon. You'll find links in the bio. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're looking for more tools for your own recovery, check out my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. It's available at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. If this show has helped you or someone you love get through their journey with stroke, you can support the show to help keep it going on patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. And if you want to work with me directly, my coaching program, Momentum, offers one-on-one support and accountability for stroke survivors who feel stuck. More at recoveryafterstroke.com/momentum. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamas. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.